Hello, and welcome to a special episode of Dairy Digressions, the new podcast of the American Dairy Science Association, the Journal of Dairy Science, and JDS Communications. I am Matt Lucy, Editor-in-Chief of JDS Communications, and I'll be your host. I'm coming to you from the 2023 annual meeting of the ADSA in Ottawa, Canada. The global gathering of scientists convenes every year and brings together the top minds in the dairy industry. For these special episodes, I'll be sitting down with experts who are attending the meeting to get their thoughts on the meeting, the sessions, the exciting new developments for dairy. If you enjoy Dairy Digressions or have any feedback for us, please let us know at adsa@ads.org. Make sure to like, subscribe, and rate us on whatever platform you're listening on, and spread the word to a friend or colleague. Now, let's get to the meeting. Today, we have is Professor and Dr. Professor Stephen LeBlanc. Stephen, welcome.
Thanks, Matt. It's good to be here.
Yeah, it's fantastic to have you. Steve and I are, I don't know, old friends, but absolutely.
We're both old and we're friends.
We're friends.
So,
yeah, right. And the Stephen LeBlanc is a professor in the Department of Population Medicine at the Ontario Veterinary College and director of Dairy at Guelph, the Center for Dairy Research and Innovation at the University of Guelph. He received his BS in Animal Science from McGill University. I didn't know that. Okay, in 1992, and a DVM in 1997, and DVSc. Now you're going to have to explain, from the University of Guelph. DVSc?
PhD with some clinical work.
Okay, fantastic. So you would consider yourself a DVM PhD then?
Sure, yes.
Oh, I didn't know that either. Okay. After 5 years of private practice, which was, I'm sure, very eye-opening and good for your career, he joined the faculty at the University of Guelph, where he teaches veterinary students and provides clinical farm service. He's past president of the Dairy Cattle Reproduction Council and served 6 years as a section editor and senior editor of the Journal of Dairy Science. And that's where I think we kind of got to know each other, was when we were working together on the Journal of Dairy Science. And his research focuses on dairy cow metabolic and reproductive health, management, precision technologies, and antimicrobial stewardship. Trains a ton of graduate students, collaborates with lots of people, publishes lots of papers, talks everywhere, gives a great talk. And I think you're a member of JDS Club 100.
I am.
Yeah. So
proud member.
This is the man. Okay. And so it's just really great to have you here, Stephen. And so we know that the Guelph group is quite large. I don't know if are you the boss or just the spiritual leader, or how does this work? Because you got all these guys up there, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm the boss of anyone, but so Dairy Guelph was the brainchild of some colleagues a few years ago to pull together into a network to increase both the internal and external connections among collaborations among people across campus, everywhere from animal science and the vet school to human nutrition economists, engineers, and so on. Anybody who's ever anything to do with dairy. And that turns out to be a lot of people. There's over 60 faculty and about 100 and at least twice as many grad students and postdoc, probably closer to 150, who at least some of their work has something to do with dairy. And so, like, here at the meeting this week, we've got, I haven't done the exact count, but dozens of posters, dozens of grad students here, again, from animal science, food science, the vet school, lots of people involved. And so my role there is to learn a little bit of nurturing some scientific collaborations, but also doing some marketing and communications to just tell our story to our to farmers, to prospective grad students, to other dairy scientists.
So I'm going to show my complete 100% not know anything here, and I know I'm going to step in it. But so Guelph, okay, you're so famous. Okay, the whole Guelph group is very well grouped.
That's recorded for posterity.
Yeah, the whole Guelph group. Let's face it. Okay, it's you and Wageningen and whatever, and it's easier to say Guelph than the other one in the Netherlands. Okay, so but the you're one of the top contributors to the Journal of Dairy Science, and no question about that. But is that where the majority of dairy farmers in Ontario get their information? Do they get it from Guelph, and specifically the College of Veterinary Medicine?
So Guelph, certainly not just the College of Vet Medicine, because there are we have a really good critical mass of dairy focused people in the vet school, but there are even more in our animal science department and other departments as well. One of our strengths, and I mean, I think it's our culture has developed that way, is very collaborative, because at some places, say a vet school and an animal science department, it's not that they don't get along, but they maybe just don't work very much together. Each one does their own thing, and that's that. But part of our culture for a long time has been to collaborate. We do a lot of work together. We got people on grad student committees and collaborative grants, the whole thing. So that's a big part of our culture, and honestly, I think a big part of our success, because you kind of mentioned Wageningen in jest, but I mean, there's some leading dairy research universities around the world, but we think like, well, if we're certainly right up there in terms of numbers of people and numbers of grad students and projects and dollars and outputs and all those things that we can count. But besides just saying yay us, I think it's having that critical mass, when we go to hire newer or not so new faculty, that there's other like-minded people around to collaborate with, whether they've got skills, they got infrastructure, equipment, but even just that human element of, hey, there's people around here who like the same stuff I do. And we're certainly the biggest shop in Canada and one of the biggest in the world. Yeah.
So there's I'm thinking Ontario itself is probably about 350,000 cows or more than that.
You did your homework. That's almost exactly right. Well done.
50,000. Now the question is, which side of Toronto do they all live on? You guys are on the west side of Toronto.
And that's where most of the cows are. So in Eastern Ontario, where we are right now in Ottawa, is another cluster of dairy farms. There's not so many in the middle of the province and very few in the north. But so there's actually more dairy cows and more dairy farms in Quebec, which is the next province east. But there's exactly as you said, about just around 35% of the total cows in Canada or in Ontario. And they're heavily clustered in southwestern Ontario. It's fantastic land. The infrastructure's there. It's very intensive.
And that's Guelph is down in that area.
Guelph is right sort of in or just on the side of dairy central for Ontario.
So I know that I know you wear lots of hats. I know because we talk and you're like, yeah, I'm teaching all week, so I'll talk to you next week or something like that. So I know you have, I guess so certainly clinical work. Do you also do formal classroom teaching as well?
Yep, some for vet students, some mostly for final year vet students, and then I do a grad course as well.
You do a grad course?
I do a grad course once every other summer. I do a grad course.
And the topic is?
It's called Dairy Health Management, which gives me scope to sort of let it evolve from year to year. But yeah.
And then this is going to be a hard question, not a hard question, but do you have percentages like your teaching, your clinical percent is this, your teaching percent this, and your research percent this?
Yes, I do on paper. And on paper, they add up to 100%. And in the real world, they add up to at least 150%.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm supposed, according to my department chair and dean, I'm supposed to be 45% doing research, 30% doing teaching, and 25% doing administrative stuff, which includes the dairy at Guelph role.
Wow.
But it adds up to, it feels like it adds up to more, but I mean, you and I maybe have the same disease, right? It's self-inflicted wounds, like, here's an opportunity to do crazy things like the editor of JDS, right?
You do these things. So when you say, if you were to kind of crystallize your current research program, I always think of you as a uterine health guy, a transition cow health guy. Do you still look at yourself as a transition cow health guy, uterine health guy? Or?
No, spot on. Those are the two things. And if I have a niche, it's bridging the two. There's lots of people who work mostly in one or the other. And when I did my DVSc PhD research, not all of it, actually, most of it had to do with uterine health. And I don't know, probably like a lot of people, by the time I got to the end of that, I was like, oh, I'm done with this. I am so fed up with this. I don't want to hear about this again. And I did kind of do other things for a few years, but I came back to it, and I haven't found the bottom yet, and I'm probably not going to. There's still a lot of cool biology, but also some very practical stuff for the field that,
Yeah.
you know, we've made some progress,
Yeah.
but there's still more to do. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll have to ask you about some of that stuff. I always tell people, you know, I used to do all ovarian work, but you know, what it came down to is, I know you guys don't practice these to the extent we do in America, but when all the pre-sync, off-sync, resync kind of programs came through and they were so effective, you know, it was just to the point where, okay, you just run out of sort of, unless you want to study basic biology of the ovary, you just run out of kind of applied questions because those programs, they're pretty dialed in. Now, I know you guys, they're not, I know in Canada, you don't do as, I don't know how much you do in Canada.
Well, honestly, like we did a survey of Canadian dairy farmers, good 8 years ago now. So things have probably changed a bit, but almost every farm used at least a little bit of synchronization. Some used a lot. Darn near everyone used a little. And lots in the middle. The thing, and you're right. I mean, that used to be the joke at the meeting here. It was like, you know, the repro section was like, what possible little tweak can we make to an off-sync program? And well, we haven't run out, but there's a lot less of that than there once was. But, you know, one chunk of my research program right now is around trying to optimize the use of activity monitors. Because partially in anticipation of social pressures or social license type questions around heavy use of sync programs, which, by the way, I think are safe for cows, safe for people, profitable for farmers. I mean, I think they're a really, they tick all the boxes as a tool. That's another podcast for another day, but you know, sadly, I think there will be some pressure, right or wrong, probably wrong, to limit that in the future, at least potentially so. Anyway, for all that, and that our farmers, Canadian dairy farmers, have really taken an interest in technology, from milking robots to activity monitors for repro. So it's really taken off, but there's still lots of questions about, you know, do they work? Yeah, they work. They're a viable tool, no question about it. But you know, can we tweak it? Can we still optimize? You know, how far can we go with this? Like, we're not going to get 100% of cows inseminated, let alone pregnant, with nothing but an activity monitor. There needs to be a backstop. And so figuring out how do we really optimize that, don't waste time on a cow that's probably never going to show a heat, but you know, what's the best timing? What's the best technique? Like so anyway, all that fine tuning, we're pretty active in that space. And then we're also, I've got a toe in the, you know, beyond repro, what can we do, you know, for finding, using the same tech, activity, rumination, all that stuff, to identify or at least help screen for cows with health problems, for example. So we've got a toe in that as well.
So my career was always ultrasound and follicles and stuff. And then we eventually started working on uterine health. And I think the reason that I went that direction was because I really felt like we had so many ways. If you were a farmer, asked me, what am I going to do? I can't get these cows pregnant. I can tell you what to do, get your cows pregnant. Okay. But then but the other question is if you, and a really good senior undergraduate could probably scratch out an off-sync program. Okay. But you can ask some really experienced, outstanding clinicians, okay, this cow's uterus is wrecked. What are you going to do? Okay. And with 100% certainty that it'll be unwracked, you know, and it's really hard, right?
It is hard. And that's, you know, or my version of maybe the same thing you're talking about is, you know, farmer says to you, like, this cow here in front of you, like, you know, why isn't she getting pregnant? What's the problem? It's like, well, I could give you 20 potential reasons and a you know, a paper to go with all of them. But you know, you're standing here right now, this cow, like, tell me exactly why and what you're going to do to fix her. You're kind of like,
how are we going to do this, right?
Call Matt Lucy. He said he had the answer.
I'll make something up, you know. And so that's one of the reasons I saw, you know, I thought the uterus was kind of like, there was a little more uncharted territory on kind of uterine health things. And so just from put on your clinical health hat for a second. And this is my personal curiosity. So what's your number one go-to? Okay. Now I know the clinical definitions can be complicated, but let's just call it metritis. Okay. What's your number one treatment?
Right now, systemic antibiotics.
Okay.
And the two, well, I mean, honestly, it's ceftiofur, which has an economic argument because the only one with zero milk withhold.
Mhm.
It's also by far the one with the body of good literature from randomized controlled trials
Yeah.
that says this works.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly, even here today, this morning, there was another poster that's building on a body of literature saying, we can probably get more refined, more specific. There's probably a subpopulation of cows with metritis
Mhm.
that we could safely leave untreated.
Mhm.
In other words, it won't harm their fertility, their production, their culling
Mhm.
risk, etc. That's certainly a minority of the cows who
Mhm.
have metritis. But the state of the art today is if metritis, treat with systemic antibiotics. And
Okay.
that is justified and rational, and that ticks all the boxes for what is rational and judicious.
For sure. Yeah.
But I think what's beautiful about science, even applied science, is, we think, yeah, okay, have we got a clear picture here? Yeah,
Mhm.
we got a clear picture here. But
Mm.
that's not the last word, because if we scratch a little deeper, we're like, actually behind this, if we get even just a little more refined, we can be like, well, actually,
Mhm.
we could cut antibiotic use, which has
Mhm.
some economic incentive for the farmer. It's somehow good in the grander scheme of the
Mhm.
ecology of antimicrobial resistance, whatever. But it has potential to be a beautiful win-win, and it's on the verge of being something that's actually very practical.
Mhm.
And there's also some kind of cool biology in it, because that gets into this thing of like, well, what is it about this cow that makes her, like, she got sick,
Mhm.
she's sick, and yet she can rebound with minimal or
Right. They
no
don't all
pharmaceutical
go,
help,
they
right?
don't all crash and burn.
No,
Some of them gotta
exactly.
get through it,
Yeah,
and so, and that's I think the recommendation that Stephen makes is identical to American, in American, that would be the same label. You have the same label in Canada as we do in America.
essentially, yeah.
Probably
There's
the
a few
same.
little subtle differences, but big picture, it's the same.
So, and then now I'll okay, so I will try not to, I feel like I'm gonna have to pay you for all this consulting when it's done, but
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, so now she's discharging, she's 30 days postpartum. You notice some discharge
Yep.
on her. The treatment is,
So again, scientifically, it's actually pretty clear cut. Today's best answer:
mhm,
intrauterine antibiotics, ceftiofur. There is a
okay,
substantial body of literature. I mean, I did one of the first, not the first, but one of the first. That was some of my PhD
Mhm.
research. It's been replicated over and over again, lots of countries, et cetera, et cetera.
yeah,
That is one of the places that's different. That particular, I mean, it's a commercial product that's approved in many countries, but not in the United States. And so
right,
importantly, it's like that is a practical thing. Like, is that worth checking on in the United States? Well, yeah, it still matters to the cow in the United States.
yeah,
But if we don't have the otherwise best available treatment,
mhm,
and then we got to think about, well, what's plan B or whatever, that starts getting a little murkier, because like typically plan B is, well, we'll give this cow one or more prostaglandin injections. And to make a very long story short, that is minimally helpful.
It's interesting, right? Even though we just want it to work, right?
Yep.
We want that to
Yep.
work, but the way I'm not a veterinarian, as but you get veterinary questions, and I always say I am not a veterinarian. But when I get that question, I always say, well, we have so many cows on pre-sync, off-sync anyways, knock yourself out. They're going to get their prostaglandins on pre-sync.
Well, and that was the thing, like, and we thought for a little while that was like, well, shoot, if all these cows are going to be on pre-sync, off-sync anyway, what the heck? Don't even worry about it. If they happen to have an underlying problem, we'll just sort them out with that.
Right.
No fuss, no muss.
Right.
Don't even need to think about it anymore. And again, long story short, that ain't so.
Yeah.
That it's not gonna, a couple PG shots don't
Yeah.
cure all ills. That's related to chronic smoldering uterine infection or inflammation. So there's still a lot we need to figure out there.
I think one thing that's interesting about uterine disease and makes it really difficult to treat is, again, it's the self-cure rate. Is a certain, I don't know what you call that in veterinary medicine, but there's a certain percentage of animals you do nothing,
spontaneous cure,
are going to get better. And if that number is high enough, it really gets more difficult to show a beneficial effect of treatment.
It absolutely does. The interesting thing, though, that's a little different, like, so for example, and I'm no mastitis expert, but in mastitis, quite a lot of mastitis infections are very short-lived. The cow fights them off, and there's no additional benefit of treating that cow with antibiotics in her udder. But for instance, with uterine disease, and I'm thinking here specifically of what we call PVD, purulent vaginal discharge. So cows got pus discharge in a month postpartum. Because what you said is exactly right. If you do nothing to that cow and come back 2 weeks later, 80% of them won't have pus discharge anymore.
That high. Okay.
It's that high. But that's a little bit insidious because that cow is still going to pay a meaningful price in terms of her future reproductive performance for having been through that. And if you treat her when you first diagnose her, you can actually mitigate that a lot. So again, that's the part where you're like, well, it's there, it's kind of here today, gone, maybe not gone tomorrow, but gone in 2 weeks. So who cares? Well, actually, the fact that you did or didn't treat her actually turns out to make quite a bit of difference.
So you did some of that stuff up here in work with Scott McDougall in New Zealand. Was that where you did some of that stuff?
So I'd done that again, going way back to my PhD work, and then about a dozen or more years later, I did a sabbatical in New Zealand, and we were trying to again kind of refine that treatment decision tree, which we did a little bit.
You did good with that. Shout out to Scott McDougall, Morrinsville Animal Veterinary Clinic, I think is the name of it.
The research business is called Cognosco. It's part of Anexa Animal. There you go. And now a word from our.
And now a word from we got to say hello to Scott. Okay,
our ratings in New Zealand are going through the roof
right now. So come on, man, you listen up, you New Zealand people. And so the local dairy scene. One of the things we want to just briefly touch on. What's on the mind of Ontario dairy farmers?
So one of the big initiatives for Canadian dairy industry as a whole, so there's cows in all 10 provinces. There's about 1 million milking cows in Canada. So it's actually proportional, right? There's about 10 times more people in the US and there's about 10 times more dairy cows in the US. It's almost exactly proportional. One of the big things that's happening is that, like in the US, except here, there's a little more national cohesion. Our dairy industry has said they're going to achieve carbon net zero by 2050.
Okay.
That was a bit aspirational when they first announced it. Maybe it still is, but that they're serious about it, and the process has begun to get there. So from a research standpoint, there's a lot of work to do there. And obviously we're going to learn across borders and so on. And interestingly, a lot of people think that means, whatever digesters and manure treatment, and that's absolutely going to be a big part of it. But a lot of things that favor cow efficiency, including our little corner of the world in fertility, that matters too. When you've got good preg rates on a farm and good fertility in a farm, that is not a trivial piece of driving down the carbon footprint of making milk on that farm. So that's going to be a big piece. One of our challenges, we've got our quota system, which has pros and cons, but it's widely supported by farmers. But one of the challenges of that right now is that because it's sort of a zero-sum game of the size of the Canadian market, it's very difficult for farmers to get more quota, so to grow the size of their herds and their businesses. So that's a limitation that can be a real challenge for some.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is we've done 5 of these podcasts, and I bet you 4 out of the 5 have talked about net zero, carbon zero, methane. It's a topic that's cutting across everybody's disciplines, and efficiency and so it's on every. I didn't predict that, but I throw these questions out, and you get what you get, and you're all mentioning the same topic, And
I think that the cool thing is, it's certainly not just an engineering problem. Like people like you and I, nutritionists and geneticists. I mean, others will talk about that, but Canada just came out with the world's first genomically based genetic index to select cows for methane efficiency.
Yeah, for sure.
Good news is that's mostly favorable, or at least not bad relative to their overall feed efficiency, production efficiency. So, but anyway, I think the point is that achieving carbon net zero is going to be everybody's business in dairy science, not just something, the manure guys will look after that and we'll just do whatever,
So it's it's a tremendous goal. And we had Filippo in here earlier, and he took a deep dive into his new genetic evaluation, and we talked. It was really good. So when you go to Guelph, so Guelph always brings a big group. I mean, I'm imagining there's some veterinarians and some DVM, some DVM PhDs, some PhD grad students, the whole kind of gamut. And but you also can go to veterinary meetings like AABP,
Correct.
American Association of Bovine. You probably have a CABP too, I guess.
There is, but they don't put meetings on. But but you're right. Yep.
Why go? Okay, I'm sure you go to both. You get different things from each one, or are they different? Are they the same? Is it?
No, they are kind of different. I mean, it's interesting. One of my mentors was Ken Leslie, who's a veterinarian, but very involved with dairy science, both doing science, but with Dairy Science, the association.
Right.
So it's interesting because I kind of grew up professionally under his mentorship, and maybe I kind of took it for granted that, well, of course, veterinarians would get involved with dairy science in both senses of the word.
Right.
But that's maybe not something to take for granted, because that's not always necessarily the case. And you're right that there's, at the end of the day, that there are differences between medicine and science. I mean, medicine is based in science, but there's a pragmatism to it. In the simplest case, you're presented with the sick cow, and you need to figure out how to make her better. You don't in the moment need to understand all the mechanisms of the how and the why. You kind of need to pretty quickly figure out the what. And again, that's a very simplified example, but there is that fork. Now, it doesn't stop there. Lots of veterinarians do ask why and want to know why and how, and especially when you're saying, okay, how am I going to go upstream and deal with this for the herd in a preventive way, not just being the fireman, so to speak, but so to answer your question, I think I see a lot, I think a lot of my colleagues see a lot of bridges. Veterinary meetings, I'm going to grossly oversimplify here, but tend to be a little bit more applied. People are looking for, what can I bring back to my clients? What can I use in my practice tomorrow, next week, a little bit shorter term. And it's not, but I think the beauty of it is, over the years, as I've gone to veterinary meetings, the amount of really well conducted, well presented science has just gone up and up. And the amount of bridging or crossover between the dairy science meetings, dairy science community, and the veterinary community, I think it just keeps building, because it is a two-way street, right? Questions come in, they're coming from nutritionists and farmers and veterinarians, but the flow back to all those people from dairy scientists, I think it's just getting better and better. The worst case, we're like the fable of the blind men around the elephant, right? Each one's touching a different part of the elephant, and they all have their own perspective, and they're none of them's wrong, but none of them's right, because they're not really getting the whole picture. Well, if we stop there, we've missed an opportunity. But I think on the other side of it, if we've got a bunch of people with different perspectives on things, that's maybe how we actually make better progress than if we all just did our own little thing in our little silo or whatever.
So do you go to other meetings besides those two, the AABP and then the ADSA?
So I'll be honest, with apologies to my vet colleagues, the ADSA annual meeting is my number. If I could only go to one meeting a year, this would be the one, because this is where, more than any place else, I learn new things. I mean, it's also a, sort of proud professional parent thing too, where the grad students get to showcase their work, and I see all my old friends and so on and so forth. But probably close behind would be the ABP meeting, again, for that networking thing. Another one is the World Pediatrics meeting, which is sort of like the Bovine Veterinary Olympics. It moves around every 2 years. It's very international. And again, same thing. It among other things, it brings home the fact, there's there's cows on 6 continents, right? That we're actually in a global business, and that those connections are easy to make with people who, cross countries, cross languages, because you've got this interest and experience in common.
And then we also have the kind of the specialty meetings, like the Ruminant Reproduction Conference, which we were at a few weeks ago in Galway, where they've just just really bringing the ruminant guys, which is pretty cool.
Yes.
And that was a really good conference, and we all got sunburned in Ireland, which is nearly impossible. So Stephen and I wanted to just briefly discuss. I'm watching your watch, and I'm watching my watch, so I got two watches I'm watching. There was a joint reproduction physiology and endocrinology symposium, basically on transition cow health and nutrition and disease. Real who's who. Anna Denicall was chairing that.
Right.
Anna's in the house, huh?
Yeah.
What's the story with that?
So there's another person. Anna's originally a veterinarian, then she got a PhD in Florida and some faculty at UC Davis. Yeah.
And she's probably not doing any clinical stuff at UC Davis.
I'm not she's not working as a clinician as far as I know, but I don't want to speak for her, but I would venture to say that having come up through that background, that informs some of the stuff she does as a scientist.
So we have Barry Bradford speaking on this in this session, Eduardo Ribeiro, Phil Cardoso, Uzi
Molam.
Like you, Stephen, Lance Baumgard, John Bromfield, and you're from our postdoc.
Osvaldo Pascatini.
Yeah, it must be Italian, right?
He's actually from Paraguay. So obviously Italian heritage, but he's from Paraguay and now living in Belgium. See, the United Nations of dairy.
And so this is a big issue, transition cow health, inflammation. Every conference now has to have a few talks about inflammation and postpartum cows. And of course, we started talking about inflammation from a uterine perspective and probably from a mammary perspective when cows get mastitis, and I don't know, Stephen, I always thought of, inflammation is, infiltration of immune cells into tissue and stuff like that. And that's certainly true for those disease type of situations. But then you have the systemic inflammation and the new players on the block, the leaky gut and the liver inflammation and all those and these cows are badly inflamed, so and I think one of the hot topics right now is sort of, what's normal? What is normal, and when to, what is normal? We don't want to overtreat. We don't want to intervene when we don't need to intervene. So we'll just throw one of the hot topics out there, ketosis, right? And the notion that let's just talk ketosis just to keep it simple. And we could talk all diseases, but we'll start with ketosis. And this kind of notion that, as I don't know what you use in Canada, but in America, we have this concept of, 1.2, whatever the unit is.
Millimoles per liter.
Thank you.
Right on.
1.2 is sort of subclinical and 3.0 is clinical. And obviously if a cow's got clinical ketosis and she's not eating and she's not right, that's one thing. But I think the debate is what the heck is subclinical and when do you need to intervene and do you need to intervene? And I think the debate that's sort of raging out there is hey, this is not an abnormal thing for a cow. Okay. And so I think it's fair to sort of, we were talking earlier that a lot of this original research come from Guelph and Cornell. I think it's fair to say that that must have been based on some epidemiological studies that suggest that if they have above this cut point, we can expect long-term implications in terms of milk production, health, and fertility. Is that fair?
Broad strokes, yeah, but so you're absolutely right. So one of the debates is ketosis a disease, and depending on how you want to frame that, you could say so, but maybe it enhances the conversation to say it's maybe more like a risk category. So the analogy which is not perfect, but the analogy I use sometimes is like if someone's a smoker, they're like way higher risk of having a heart attack and a stroke and getting lung cancer. But it doesn't mean you're going to get that. Like, some times people get lucky and they don't. I mean, that's
Mhm.
that's an extreme risk. Like, so ketosis isn't
Mhm.
like the equivalent of smoking, but
Mhm.
if you know, smoking isn't a disease,
Yeah.
but it's like massively associated with the risk of other diseases. So
Right.
by analogy,
Mhm.
maybe that helps the conversation a
Mhm.
little bit.
Mhm.
So let's call it a risk category. It's
Mhm.
an epidemiological, a statistical
Mhm.
association, a higher risk category. It's not a fate or a, you know, that a cow that has above X
Mhm.
BHB in her blood is condemned to a bad fate. She's
Mhm.
just at higher risk. And interestingly, even if you go back to some of that older work from 25 years ago,
Mhm.
um, there were different cut points based on different outcomes. So just for example, the oft used 1.2 millimole per liter of blood BHB
Mhm.
is mostly associated with risk of other clinical diseases, like, so the classic one being displaced abomasum.
Oh yeah.
You know, cows that are above that cut point are 2, 3 times, 4 times more likely in the
Mhm.
days ahead to go and have a DA. And I mean, that's been replicated over and that is, you know, as close to a fact as we can have. But the thing is, okay, beyond that, does
Mhm.
it matter to the cow? And it doesn't, like, and right, triple risk doesn't mean every cow gets a DA, right? If the baseline risk, you know, whatever is 2%, well,
Mhm.
now it's at 6%. That's triple, but that's still a small number of cows,
Mhm.
right? And so if we think about milk, for example, even in that older sort of classical work, the threshold was quite a bit higher, and the timing of that ketosis matters a lot. And there's actually been some really nice new work come out of Minnesota that
Mhm.
has gone back to that and kind of really highlighted the fact that you know, they were focusing especially on the timing,
Mhm.
and also saying, well, don't just look at blood BHB in isolation, also look at what the cow's doing for milk.
Okay.
And honestly, I think that makes tons of sense. As a quick aside, I mean,
Yeah.
there's an interesting so to long story short, in their data, and actually in some of our older data, you know, the cow that has both low early milk and high early BHB is, you know, not in a good place. Now, did one cause the other? If so, what's the direction of the arrow? Not sure we know that. Or are those in fact two different things with a common cause,
Right.
1 or 2 or 3 dots upstream?
Right.
That's a cool science question that I don't think we know the answer
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
yet. And so, you know, we're working on that. Lots of people are working on that. So that's cool science stuff. But if you're like, okay, that's nice, doctor, but give me something practical for tomorrow
Mhm.
morning. So I think that's one nuance that sometimes gets lost in the you know, in the debate about what's a dogma or not a dogma.
Mhm.
The other one too, which other groups have shown, but actually you scratch back in our older data
Mhm.
is there as well, is the timing. So again, to make a long story short, a cow that is ketotic, has a blood BHB above, say, 1.2 in the first week postpartum,
Mhm.
that is associated, more strongly associated and associated with more types of undesirable outcomes: less milk, greater disease risk, worse associations with
Mhm.
her fertility, you know, months later,
Mhm.
than if the cow makes it through the first week without ketosis, has this diagnosis, if you want, say in the second week only. And obviously there's an interaction there in the sense that some of those cows in the second week were in the first week. So there's like a cumulative effect in
Mhm.
there somewhere. But anyway, so I think practically, yeah, the threshold varies a little, timing matters,
Mhm.
and absolutely fair enough as we want to get smarter about it. It shouldn't just be looked at in isolation, right?
Right.
Because everyone can point to, yeah, but here's this cow who's making 100 pounds of milk at, you
Right.
know, 3 weeks fresh.
Mhm.
And I measured her blood BHB and it's like way high.
Mhm.
And yet, you know, you're telling me she has a glycol deficiency,
Yeah.
and like, well, no, no, fair enough. Like, but then the flip side is there, if we think about maybe some of the less obvious stuff,
Mhm.
like knock on, I was about to say effects, knock on associated outcomes to do with fertility, right? Because
Right.
this cow who lives through ketosis and early lactation, treated or not, again, there is an association whereby
Right.
those cows, other things being
Right.
equal, probably take a bit of a hit in their pregnancy of first service and so on.
Right.
And mechanistically, like that probably has mostly to do with their oocytes that are in, in their early stage of development, while all this metabolic stuff, of which BHB is one little marker, one puzzle piece. But anyway, but I think, so again, back to the science, like mechanistically, what exactly is going on there? I think we got lots of cool science to figure that out. But practically, does it matter to the cow that she had ketosis? Most of the evidence would say yes, as an association. Again, that's
fair
not
enough,
yes, no, you're going to get pregnant, you're not. And then the thorny question is, okay, let's even say, we can say this cow's at risk of, taking a hit on her pregnancy of first service. And let's even say that we're all in agreement that that's the deal. Okay. Now what? Like, can I, if this is a problem, can I fix it? Is there some amount of glucose or propylene glycol or some other thing that will fix that problem, that will make that better?
Yeah.
Don't know.
Yeah, I think to a certain extent, I think dairy might a little bit confused now, what to do, and I think the message, and it's I'm not a veterinarian or anything, but there's a little bit of this message, if she looks fine, is milking fine, just go with it. But again, that doesn't address the potential downstream implications of it, and so we have to think about those aspects and the and I know that I know there's lots of I feel there's two things that I think that are going to happen in this story. First of all, cows are changing rapidly in terms of their genetics. Okay. And so we may end up with cows that are, very resistant to the effects of these metabolites on their systems. And so they might be able to live, for a good example is Jerseys. I think Jerseys live with higher VHBs than Holsteins. I don't know if that's true. And I think I seem to remember that from somewhere. Not true.
I don't know. We see some differences. The truth is that we typically don't, we typically don't have enough data on Jerseys to really do the epi work. So,
well, I think but things could change over time.
Absolutely. They are. And, we're both old enough to remember a time when, especially in the context of fertility, when we're going backwards, or it seemed like we sure as heck were going forwards, and then we seem to be kind of stalled out for quite a little while there. But now we are not like the things that really turned a corner there. And I think you're exactly right. And that's pretty exciting because the royal we of geneticists and dairy scientists in general, I think we're getting way better at for sure managing cows, feeding them, managing them, the whole deal, but also finding cows that we don't have to give up milk, but we can improve fertility and call those resilient cows if you want to, call them efficient cows if you want to, but we don't have to sacrifice milk. They can still make a lot of milk, but they don't milk off their backs as much. They convert feed more efficiently. Yes, we feed them better. Yes, we manage them better. That's a prerequisite. But it's an exciting time to be alive as a dairy producer, dairy scientist, because
the cows are changing.
They're changing fast. And they're changing in a good direction, right?
And I was and I'll just give a shout out to the folks at Tuggis Moore Park and their next generation herd. And that's one of the things when you look at these next generation cows and compare them to controls, is that a lot of these, these extreme metabolites early postpartum, they sort of normalize, meaning they body condition is better in a next generation cow, and these metabolite concentrations are lower, glucose is higher, and so what you see in a modern next generation elite cow with all the right genetics is you're not seeing the extremes in body condition, metabolism, and they make milk a different way,
Yep.
So Stephen is a member of the board of directors of the American Dairy Science Association, and member of the board of directors have to go get their picture taken, and so I have to let him go, but I will you can make the decision. Okay, it's 4:35 in the afternoon. Is it 5:35 or 4:30?
You're good.
You're 4:35, and so the last question, and you could take as much time as you want to answer this question. Where do you think the science is going in the future? Is there anything you want to say? Now, every minute you talk is a minute you're late for your picture.
Okay, I still remember how to tie my tie, so I should be okay with that.
Okay, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that when I said it's an exciting time to be alive as a dairy scientist or a dairy producer, no joke. I think that we're getting better slowly but surely at integrating. And we talked earlier about maybe breaking down the little wall between vets and dairy scientists. And so I think even within dairy science, and this afternoon's symposium was a perfect example, right? Yeah. Traditionally, the nutritionist would have been in one room and the reproductive physiologist would have been in another room, and it probably wasn't an inflammation room, but maybe the animal health people were off in another room, and they were all having a good and productive time. But I think that that's integrating like that is gonna really accelerate our progress. I mean, I will freely admit that I had a running joke with some of my colleagues that the classic genetics equation where it's like P equals G plus phenotype equals genotype plus environment. And we always redrew that with like the world's biggest E and a really tiny G, because we're like, it's all about management. It's not about the genetics. And I got to eat humble pie on that one, because among other things, I mean, yeah, management has not become any less important, but the amount of progress we've made with genetics and genomics is huge, and that's only going to accelerate. And then you weave in some of the technology that's coming, and I just think it's a very cool time. Like we're not in the doldrums anymore of scientific progress. It's an exciting time. There's lots to do. I mean, how many things have we talked about? Like, there's still more to do. There's still more to do. And yet we're not just spinning our wheels, I don't think. So to me, that's why it's like, we can show that we're actually made some progress in milk and resilience and in cows staying healthy, et cetera. And yet, we've identified our next 10 research projects in the last 45 minutes, right?
So I will you just, I don't know, you got a lot of gas in the tank for a guy who's been working a long time, I'll tell you right now. But I would just for all you would-be veterinarians or kids that want to go to vet school, or haven't thought about that, there is this is an exciting field. Large animal practice, large animal veterinary research. There's a lot of action here.
There is.
You can, and as Stephen will tell you, you're looking for good people that want to get into the action. And it's an open door. Look, come on in, the water's great. Like my best friends are veterinarians and dairy scientists. It's good people, and you don't have to have grown up in it. I didn't. I don't think we're going to run out of really cool things to do, but practical things too. So the door is open. And the Leafs are going to win the Stanley Cup
this
year.
I hope not. That's not
that's not your team.
No, they're not. So they absolutely are not, but I also don't want them to, because that's not my team. I am a Montreal Canadiens fan. I will bleed red, white, and blue, mostly red, of the Montreal Canadiens. Yeah.
Well, I tried. Well, it's been fantastic, and Stephen, you're a tremendous sport and a tremendous asset to the dairy community, and we have a gift for you, and you have to open it up on camera. Okay, you have to open it up on camera, and this is
I like the wrapping, especially.
That's Jess. Jess has got it. Okay, she's Holstein centric. Okay,
Cool.
So if you turn that around,
Oh, nice. No, this is my new favorite mug, like my new favorite coffee mug. Right on.
everybody
Very
from Guelph is
Digressions.
gonna be jealous,
Good
okay?
story. Like I'm gonna have to like etch my name in this. So
Oh,
that,
yeah,
you
it's
know,
just
people-
just wait till Nina sees it, okay? She's
Oh,
gonna want some.
I got mine before Nina.
Oh,
Wow,
yeah,
I win.
Nina doesn't.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Oh,
Matt. It's
thank
been
you very,
fun.
been fun. Okay, good.